Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 2 o'clock. My name is Rebecca Harned with the National Alliance for Public Safety GIS Foundation, and we'll be getting started with today's virtual training. Great, so provided here is a brief overview of today's agenda. We'll start with a welcome and opening, moving into a training overview, and then we'll transition to a HIFLD open briefing and demonstration of capabilities. We'll then move into some live demos of applications from recent events that apply HIFLD data. We'll culminate with a few questions and answers. And just a couple of notations. All questions that you may have as participants will be handled through the question and answer feature in WebEx. So you can put your questions there as you have them throughout the duration of today's training, and we will take several of those questions at the end of today's session. An additional note is that we are recording today's session, and all materials used in today's session will be available on our website, and we will be sending an email link when all of that is posted to all registered participants. Great, so for those of you who may be new to NAPSG Foundation, just want to provide you with a really quick overview of who we are and what we do. We are a 501c3 non-for-profit organization established over 10 years ago, back in 2005. We have a 23,000 member network, primarily representing public safety officials from across the different disciplines, operators, as well as the GIS staff that support public safety officials. NAPSG was started as an alliance between many of the major national nonprofit public safety associations that you see listed here. And fundamentally, our vision is to provide resources and support necessary to equip responders and leaders with knowledge and skills to apply decision support technology and data. Provided here is just a quick overview of where our national member network comes from. You can certainly see some concentration in the urban areas, but we are representative and support all communities, large and small, urban, suburban, and rural across the United States. So a really quick overview of today's training purpose and objectives. We'll be providing you with a training that allows you to gain awareness level knowledge on the latest developments of the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data, otherwise known as HIFLD, and get some insights on key lessons learned from its use in recent events, including the recent series of major hurricanes that we've experienced. Mike Donnelly with DHS, along with Travis Hardy, will provide us with the latest updates on HIFLD data and the migration from HIFLD Open to the federal GEO platform. We'll gain insights on how this impacts you and any web mapping applications that you have using HIFLD data today. And then we'll go into some of those lessons learned and emerging best practices in actually using that HIFLD data to support decision making. So with that, I'd like to just do some really quick overview of our instructors today. I have Michael Donnelly, the Acting Director of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Geospatial Management Office with us today. Welcome, Mike. Along with Travis Hardy, the HIFLD Program Manager, Contract Support to the DHS Geospatial Management Office with Ardent MC, and myself, Rebecca Harned, Director of National and Federal for NAPSG Foundation. And with that, I'd like to hand over this briefing to Mike Donnelly and Travis Hardy. Over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Can you hear me okay, Rebecca?
Sure can. Loud and clear.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Like Rebecca said, I'm Mike Donnelly. And, you know, the thing I'll start off with is that we all have something in common. You don't know what I'm going to say, and actually neither do I. That said, I am the Acting Director for the DHS Geospatial Management Office. I'm also the Executive Secretary for HIFLD. Thank you to Rebecca and NAPSG for this opportunity today to talk to you about some important updates regarding HIFLD, specifically HIFLD Open, as you just heard. First, a little primer. So HIFLD, as you know, is a subcommittee under the Federal Geographic Data Committee. More importantly, it's a coalition of federal agencies along with state and local organizations that work together to help address emerging Homeland Security foundational level data needs. So for example, the HIFLD for Irma, HIFLD for Harvey sites that were stood up several weeks back, that's what HIFLD is supposed to be doing, is working across government, across communities to determine where we can get best data and how do we make that data accessible. Now, HIFLD Open in particular launched in February 2016, and since then it's been our go-to platform for publishing unclassified HIFLD data open for use by the public. HIFLD Open, along with HIFLD Secure, were evolutionary steps for our program to help us get more data into the hands of first responders at a faster and more accessible rate. Based on your feedback and the metrics we've collected, it seems that both HIFLD Open and Secure is useful to your mission and is getting actively used. So today we want to announce to you that we're moving HIFLD Open to the Federal Geospatial Platform. I realize this transition could be challenging, but it brings the HIFLD Open site to what we believe is the rightful home for this type of data and the capabilities the site provides to you. Travis Hardy and the rest of the HIFLD support team is going to walk you through how this transition is going to go, some of the timelines and what to expect. And like I said, we understand that there's going to be challenges, but in the long run, we believe migrating HIFLD Open to the platform will increase our federation and data sharing capabilities with other federal data providers and platforms. So we can truly give you kind of the no wrong door approach. You go to the platform and you can get access to any data you need. So with that, let me turn it over to Travis, who will walk you through it.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. As Mike and Rebecca mentioned, my name is Travis Hardy. I'm a contract support to the DHS Geospatial Management Office and the HIFLD Executive Secretariat. And so, as Mike just briefly teed up, a little bit about what we're going to talk to you today about is, for those of you that may be new to the HIFLD program, Mike's given you maybe a 30-second elevator pitch, and I'll give you a little bit more detail to hopefully orient you to the program itself. For those of you that have been working with HIFLD Open for a little over the year that it's been instantiated, we'll talk to you a little bit about some of the recent changes in the site itself, in particular, as Mike mentioned, the recent migration over to the Geo platform and what that may mean for you. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the new features and functions on the site itself and maybe some upcoming events and data releases as it relates to the HIFLD Open ecosystem before turning it back over to Rebecca. Next slide. So before I kind of dive right into the specifics of the HIFLD program, I think it's important to understand exactly where the HIFLD program is homeroomed inside DHS and Mike's office. So a little bit about the Geospatial Management Office itself. There's a very large Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004 that details in many, many more specifics all of the auspices and authorities of the office itself and what it's supposed to do. But essentially, the Geospatial Management Office is a headquarters level entity inside the DHS Chief Information Officer's office that is there to provide enterprise enabling geospatial capabilities and data. And we do that not only for, say, the legacy DHS components in the Homeland Security community that may be robust or mature with their GIS offerings and programs, but also maybe for the have-nots or the recent newcomers, whether that be new components to DHS itself, and also some folks that are kind of emerging in the Homeland Security and emergency preparedness community itself. So kind of supporting both the haves and have-nots any way we can, and we do it largely across three big bucket areas. The first is there on the left, and that's enterprise mission essential geospatial data. That can be common operating data, which predominantly is serviced by the HIFLD community, as well as operational data, so dynamic data sets like ship tracking, Blue Force tracking, et cetera. We also provide enterprise-level geospatial platform capability through our flagship infrastructure offering called the GII, or the Geospatial Information Infrastructure. And then we service components both in tradecraft training as well as mission search support particularly in times of disaster. So like Mike mentioned, most importantly in the recent hurricane response activities. Click one more time, Rebecca. So again, for purposes of today and what we're talking about with HIFLD, we're mainly going to be focused on this enterprise geospatial data box and kind of that service offering from the GMO. But as you can see, there are a couple other offerings that we could even dive even deeper and extend this webinar even longer. But again, just from orienting yourself and where we're coming from in the GMO and where HIFLD Executive Secretariat lives, it is in that box itself. Next slide. So Mike touched briefly on this in his opening remarks, but I think it's important to reiterate. At its core, HIFLD is nothing but a subcommittee to the Federal Geographic Data Committee, and that verbiage that's very long-winded there on the screen is pulled straight from our originating charter. However, HIFLD as an ecosystem is supported by sort of two other I guess, sides of the golden triangle. So that's really on the supply side with over 68 plus and growing data providers, and on the demand side, which hopefully is a lot of you folks on the call today who are the users and consumers or the mission owners and operators of that data inside your GIS platforms to really support mission, but also to support mission at the speed of mission and response. So together with kind of that golden triangle with the governance structure and as an approval authority with the subcommittee itself, we do things like identify mission requirements and we sort of look to see where data is currently filling those mission requirements and where there may be gaps, where data needs to be brought into the HIFLD ecosystem to support. We inventory our current list of data providers. That includes our government data providers as well as the commercial industry itself to kind of evaluate what might be available to fill any emerging data gaps or requirements. And then through the subcommittee's deliberation and consensus and approval, we might look to obtain data from an existing data provider or change the way we're getting that data currently from that data provider. In the case where it might require a new data provider in the HIFLD ecosystem, we would work with both DHS and our core mission partner, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, as well as all of the voting members of the subcommittee to help possibly fund a new data acquisition to fill that requirement. And then once any of that data is obtained and brought in, we decide kind of where's the best place to enable or disseminate that data so it can do the most good while recognizing also overarching security concerns and the like. And that can be on our HIFLD Open platform, which I'll talk a lot about today, or on our HIFLD Secure platform on the DHS Geospatial Information Infrastructure. Once that data has been properly kind of instantiated on its corresponding infrastructure and disseminated, we work with all of our partners, data providers, and user community to maintain that data. We do our best for currency and completeness, and that's an ongoing and evergreen kind of struggle for us. And then we look to archive old data as we need to. And we do all of that through an optimization loop with our feedback loops with our user communities. And that is an annual process and an ongoing process that we have certainly an annual feedback session, typically in the fall, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But also we work with many of you on the phone and hope to be working with many more to look for other forms in which we can take your feedback to help us improve the quality and completeness of our data holdings. Next slide. So strategically, some of the major areas that we've been working on over the last couple of years to transform the program have been one, as some of you may know, moving from a DVD distribution of the HIFLD data sets. Historically, maybe over the last 14 years or so, HIFLD data, and previously known as HSIP data, has been circulated around on 7 DVD sets that have been sort of, for lack of better terms, trapped on a FOUO stamp on each one of those DVDs. And so we've been working quite extensively with DHS, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and all of our HIFLD subcommittee members to sort of uncouple a lot of the data there, as particularly the open unclassified data, instantiate that on infrastructures like HIFLD Open, as well as looking to simplify data use agreements or things that really spell out restricted data sets themselves, and that can be in the area of HIFLD Secure or FOUO license, or our HIFLD Secure and licensed data sets, and those are things that are currently reside in our HIFLD Secure infrastructure. But we've been working aggressively, and we hope to make a few announcements this fall about ways that we've been able to streamline and hopefully open up more improved access to those secure data sets. And when we have those kind of ready for full announcement, I'm sure we'll be working with the NAPSG community to maybe hopefully have a follow-on webinar about that, because I think there'll be some exciting announcements coming down the road. And then sort of constantly this balance that we must strike between making sure that we are disseminating as much information as we can in sort of an open data first policy where possible, while also making sure that we're kind of balancing things like OPSEC and the increased security restrictions that we see placed on all of our enterprises. So that's an area where we sort of have one foot in both camps, and we work to strike that balance accordingly. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about HIFLD Open today, both in general and also its recent migration to the GEO platform. But for many of you that may be on the phone who may have never even visited HIFLD Open or haven't had a chance to really understand much about what it offers, today HIFLD Open really represents the data holdings from the HIFLD community. They're open and completely unrestricted for use by folks like yourself and Homeland Security, emergency preparedness, academia, even in the private sector, we're seeing rapid uptake of our HIFLD open data layers. And just to give you an example, there's over 329 data sets that spread across 24 categories on the HIFLD Open site itself. And the data holdings range from anywhere from hospitals to pharmacies to fire stations, public venues, solid waste, landfills, as well as cellular call service areas, and on and on and on. And hopefully these are things that are foundation level data sets that can help provide, they're at a national scale, that can help provide you a level of situational awareness or add to your current situational awareness to help you support your missions and your daily job. Next slide. So just a couple of quick summary statistics here on the screen about our usership and download since we've launched the site, I guess maybe in February 2016, so a little over a year now. And originally before launching HIFLD Open, we had approximately 6,500, I guess, email addresses that were associated in some form or fashion with mailing addresses that had kind of previously gone out with DVDs. And as you can see here, with the launch of HIFLD Open and the expanded ability to reach so many folks with online dissemination, we've just seen that user community really explode, as well as the amount of feedback and engagement we've had with the open Homeland Security and emergency preparedness communities. And so we really are excited about kind of this quote-unquote experiment that DHS was able to birth over a little over a year ago, and continuing to, as I mentioned before, take an open data first policy where possible, particularly as it relates to evaluating new data sets that come into the subcommittee and the ecosystem. And so we're really pleased by the continued expansion and use of that site. But with that said, I guess growing pains do come in, and as well as kind of the need to align better with where we can get long-term supportability and mission caretaking. So that kind of leads me to my next slide. So in the spring of 2017, the then director of the GMO, Mr. Lilly, worked with Todd DeBolt, who's the system owner of the federal government's GEO platform, and really kind of recognizing that there are constraining fiscal environments that are being applied to all federal agencies, as well as just kind of looking at the mission alignment and the long-term programmatic planning for both the GEO platform and the DHS Geospatial Information Infrastructure. You can click one more time, Rebecca. There was a deal that was struck between DHS Geospatial Management Office and the Department of Interior to begin to migrate what was then the DHS HIFLD Open ArcGIS Online site to, and you click one more time just for extra added magical animation effect, to the DOI's GeoPlatform. And a couple of things drove that decision. First and foremost was the mission authorities and outlines. DHS and the GMO and its resulting geospatial information infrastructure is really charged with providing geospatial data to the Homeland Security Information Network, and FOUO and LES sensitive data, and that's really where our strong suits lie in servicing that community, whereas the geospatial platform had the core mission of servicing open data and dissemination of federal government open data through its geoplatform infrastructure. And so it really made sense, both through alignment of resourcing as well as programmatic, to kind of make this migration over to the GeoPlatform. And in doing so, we hope we can instantiate some new capabilities and new offerings along the way. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So in terms of this migration, its possible impact to you all as the user community, as well as kind of where we are tracking from a programmatic standpoint, I think there's a couple of things I want to emphasize on this very busy timeline schedule. The first and foremost, for those of you that have been historically either registering the services on the DHS HIFLD Open site, I want you to pay careful attention to that blue line going from left to right at the top of the schedule. And that really is our commitment to you in the hopes of not disrupting your mission in any way, in kind of maintaining that legacy DHS HIFLD Open site between now and really the foreseeable future. I think it kind of extends maybe even past March of 2018, but making sure that we have the present capability that is stood up and may even be harnessed or registered with your common operating pictures or other geospatial platforms and servicing you today, to still maintain that. So we're not going to kick the plug out of the wall by any stretch from that legacy site. Next, as you kind of go from north to south on that schedule, we have been working aggressively over the summer months to clone that legacy site, as well as upgrade it in transit to the GeoPlatform's ArcGIS Online for Organizations account, and then reinstantiate it in kind of a refreshed package offering on the geospatial platform, and I'll provide that link here in a minute. And then really work with our mission partners to make sure that they understand, like today in this forum, understand why we're making that kind of migration to the GeoPlatform, and then helping them any way we best can to ensure that migration or that transition over to the new site is as successful as possible for them, while we work to kind of also add and update new data as it comes to our ecosystem to this new site. And if you kind of note the final bar, the orange bar there from left to right, is literally what we're doing today and we'll be doing on an ongoing basis, probably throughout the remainder of the federal fiscal year. And that is at every offering, making sure that we're presenting presentations like this or something similar to inform the community about what we're doing, what our plans are, and how we hopefully are making some short-term pain for some long-term gain in this migration of HIFLD Open to the GeoPlatform. Next slide. So as you can see there, and I'll give you a little bit of time to either write down, or these slides will be distributed, I'm sure, following this webinar, and it's being recorded. There's the site for the new HIFLD Open on the GeoPlatform. And we've been able to take advantage of not only all the offerings of the GeoPlatform, but as we made this migration, as I mentioned earlier, we've been able to maybe provide a couple of feature functionality upgrades from going from the 1.0 Esri Open Data site to the 2.0 version, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. But I definitely wanted to make sure I left this slide up as long as I could to allow you to kind of write down that link or make any changes to your browser favorites to ensure that you have the latest link to go to. Before I leave this slide, one thing that's important is, as of right now, the latest data snapshot, both sites are in parity. And what I mean by that is the data holdings that are in the legacy HIFLD Open site off the DHS RGS online for organizations, as well as this new HIFLD Open on the Geo platform are both equal. They both have the same data. And we just wrapped up a maintenance cycle where that is complete. However, going forward, maybe as an incentive to get people to migrate, the new data sets in our quarterly maintenance cycle, probably starting, I would say, in the December timeframe, will be only added to this new site. And we'll be making sure that we provide not only NAPSG, but everyone who has previously registered in our HIFLD email distro that information so they can make sure that they're aware of the fact that going forward in our next quarterly release cycle, we'll be only kind of providing new or updated data to this HIFLD Open site. And like I said, it's maybe kind of an incentive to make sure that folks are beginning to make that migration. Next slide. Okay, so for those of you that are new to HIFLD, or maybe this is your first time hearing about HIFLD Open, I guess the good news for you is that link that was on the last slide. You can just go to that and begin using HIFLD Open today. And certainly if you run into any problems, we're happy to field your questions through an email address. It's hifld@hq.dhs.gov, and it'll be at the end of this slide deck as well. And we'll be happy to support you any way we can. For those of you that have been used to seeing the form factor of the HOLD legacy DHS HIFLD Open site, I did just want to quickly run through a couple of small nuanced feature functionality, either additions or differences that you may notice that I think it's important for you to be mindful of, and make sure that you have that as a result of today's call. So with that, I'm just going to kind of give you a quick orientation of side-by-side of what some of the new differences are. And so as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, as you explore a category, say agriculture on the main homepage, and when you make that first click on that category, you might be presented here with, say, state fairgrounds. And that left-hand side is the traditional view of how you would initially be exposed to that data set. On the right-hand side is pretty much relatively the same display, but I did want to just make one call out, is that there are sort of some new filter by, and that allows some additional discoverability through metadata tagging, which we hope to increase over the years as things have related tags, or they might be coming from disparate sources systems as we've been working with our data providers to provide web service links directly to source. So here you see the DHS GII, but maybe in the future you might see that coming straight from the USDA system, just as a notional example. Next slide. So as you click on that state fairgrounds data set itself, the second screen that you're presented with, and on the left-hand side is our traditional site, which certainly offered a robust description of the data set as well as a preview of the data set. And you'll see the same level of functionality is there today on the Geo platform HIFLD Open site. But now you might see some slight differences in the way that attribute information is sort of presented here in this sort of box format. And so one of the things, instead of just being a list view, each one of these box formats gives not only kind of the description of what that field contains, whether it's a text box or numerical, but also if you kind of look there, it may be hard to see here on the webinar, you might see a chart on some of those attributes, and that kind of allows you the ability to do some dynamic charting, and I'll show that here in a second. As well as on the right-hand side of the screen, in the blue text, you have the ability to leverage a couple of other functionalities that weren't previously there for you or weren't previously easily exposed. So like create a web map, or if you're actually even logged into the Geo platform itself, which is not mandatory, by the way, for use of HIFLD Open, but if you have a Geo platform login or an Esri login ID, you can actually start a story map with this data right there and just launch a story map if you so choose. Next slide. So one of the other items, as I'm as I mentioned earlier, is just kind of the orientation. Oh, Rebecca, did we jump ahead one? My screen may have. There we go. As I mentioned earlier, you can kind of see the reorientation of where charting has moved to. On the left-hand side, you kind of see that with a separate tab. Now it's more integrated on the description, summary level description of the data set itself. And I actually looked like I jumped ahead of myself when I talked a little bit about creating a story map. So I guess we'll go to one more slide. Thanks, Rebecca. And I guess to orient you a little bit more about where the My Activity is, so this was an opportunity on the top left or the top right-hand side of the old legacy site. You'll see a white bar there called My Activity. And then that was an area that sort of showed if you had a download in progress or what downloads you've taken place during your session. Now that's in a dockable window on the far right-hand side of the screen. So as you slide your mouse over, an arrow will appear and you can kind of see this side docking window where not only now you can see your download history in your session, per your session, but also if you are using an Esri global account or a GeoPlatform login, they're federated, so you can use either. You can begin to tag favorites of a data set that you want to maybe periodically go back to and then see that immediately in that kind of new My Activity docking window. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Just to beat the charting dead horse, here is kind of that same level of functionality as I've been kind of reiterating and how it's sort of instantiated on the new site. Next slide. Okay. I'm not sure how many folks that are maybe developers or scripting folks on the phone we have, but I think this is some capability that certainly is brand new in the new version we have of HIFLD Open on the GeoPlatform, and it is important to emphasize, and that is this new API query builder, which, so if you're used to trying to maybe script towards a particular data set, there may have been, you just kind of grab the service and you pulled it in at a national level. Well, this actually allows you to do a little bit of other expanded options. And what I mean by that is you can pick and choose just the attribute and output fields that you might want to see from the data set. You can also play around with sort of the spatial inputs or the spatial filter itself in case you want to just pull in over a particular AOR. And as you do that on the left-hand query build-out capability, on the right-hand side, the query URL will dynamically change. And so then you're provided that little service URL that you can, once you've got your script the way you want it, or your API the way you want it, to just copy and paste and drop into your applications of choice. So it's a really handy dandy tool there if you're used to kind of wanting to dynamically script and call data sets straight from HIFLD Open, that we really hope that users will take an additional advantage of. Next slide. Okay, so kind of moving down the technical scale from developer scripting egghead to metadata propeller heads, which is something I am sometimes, is just a slight change that I did want to make everybody aware of from the legacy site, which was set to default FGDC metadata standard or CSDGM format, to the new HIFLD Open site, which actually uses ISO 19139 metadata, and this is an XML encoded version of metadata. So why is this important? Well, if you actually click on the View Metadata tab or link on a particular data set, you're presented with the screen that's in the far back. And that is a, maybe best way to describe it is a more machine-readable format in that ISO 19139 metadata. But if to kind of get that in a more human-readable format, or maybe a more classic view that you might have seen the metadata presented from HIFLD, all you have to do is change that word default in the URL string to the acronym FGDC, hit enter, and it'll immediately dynamically change that metadata or change the viewing of that metadata into a more classic FGDC metadata view. So just a small tips and trick that I wanted to call out here to make sure that everyone on the phone was aware in case they did want to just kind of have a little better way to read the metadata. Next slide. Okay, so that kind of concludes sort of an overall orientation of the new HIFLD Open for Geo platform site, but I did want to make you aware of some very recent, as of, say, last week, additions we've made to both the legacy HIFLD Open site and the new HIFLD Open from the Geo platform. And that is some recently provided data from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency that put on contract Oak Ridge National Laboratory to update several data sets, and those are listed here. And so every one of those data sets that are here has been recently added to HIFLD Open, and they've been enhanced. So for purposes of the call today, I just kind of wanted to use this forum to make sure that you all were aware of that information. We're going to be going out over the course of the next week or so with some more formal communication and a broadcast blast through our HIFLD community, but I did just kind of want to take advantage of the webinar today to make that announcement to all of you on the phone. Next slide. Okay, so as Rebecca talked about, we've had several success stories that I think that we can directly call out, and I know Rebecca's going to touch on a couple of demonstrable success stories in the form of apps later on in today's presentation, but I did just want to briefly highlight HIFLD as it's been applied to some of the recent hurricane events, and really for HIFLD Open, that kind of started in Hurricane Matthew, where then Director Fugate of FEMA was very concerned about vulnerable populations and in particular mobile home parks that might be in the path of the storm that was yet to make landfall. And he kind of had a broadcast call out throughout FEMA for that information, and then we were able to work with the GIO of FEMA to understand that requirement, as well as speak to our partners at NGA and Oak Ridge National Labs, where we were just about to have a rollout of a new mobile home parks data set. And so traditionally, under the old kind of DVD construct, that data set would have to have been pressed to a DVD and maybe FedEx overnight to DC and somewhere, and then kind of recopied or distributed or copied up to an infrastructure. And so it would have been kind of measured in days for a level of response like that. But with the way we had HIFLD Open configured and working with all of our partners, Oak Ridge was simply able to just kind of apply that new mobile homes data set to our ArcGIS Online account, and then with under probably 40 minutes or so, we were able to expose that brand new data set on HIFLD Open for consumption by FEMA to make this map. So maybe if you click one more time. This map, which was not only briefed to the then Administrator Fugate, but also President Obama in response to Hurricane Matthew there in the Oval Office as the storm made landfall. So it was really a way for us to kind of take this foundation level data and infrastructure site and kind of make it accelerate and move at the speed of mission to make it dynamic to support some of FEMA's needs as Hurricane Matthew made landfall. Most recently, we have been, at the request of FEMA, asked to provide data curation, data aggregation services that have been very event-related, and in particular, that's for the three most recent hurricanes, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, and Maria. And Hurricane Harvey itself, we actually were able to just pretty much replicate a lot of the best practices we'd applied for HIFLD Open site to instantiate a new event-specific site, and that was true of the follow-on hurricanes that were really in line with FEMA's GEO framework, and not only allowed us the opportunity to host some of the HIFLD Open layers that might be relevant to those areas of impact, but begin to curate and dynamically bring in and register data sets as they became available and relevant to the response for the hurricanes, and as well as register in rapid fashion a number of extremely useful applications that say show the open and closed status of various big box stores, all the way to maybe what you see on the bottom part of the screen, which was really a dynamic dashboard app that showed maybe open and closed hospitals, as well as scraping social media calls for assistance. So this really offered the HIFLD team to work very closely and collaboratively with not only quote-unquote FEMA headquarters elements, but also those that were really operating in situ in the affected areas. And maybe click one more time. Okay. And as you can see, and we still have to kind of work our way through all of the after-action process, but we were very pleased by the fact that all of our infrastructures that we were able to instantiate were leveraged quite considerably by the folks on the ground. And here in particular is just a couple of quotes that we received as far as the usefulness of those sites, and we hope that all of that will continue to bear out in the follow-on after-action reports. Next slide. Okay, so coming down the home stretch here, and I did just want to make everyone aware on this call that, as I briefly mentioned earlier, we are planning to have our annual HIFLD Community Feedback Forum. It is held in the Washington, D.C. National Capital Area, at actually USGS headquarters in Reston, Virginia, every year. We'll be able to have some abilities for folks who cannot travel to virtually attend that. And certainly everyone on this call is absolutely invited to participate and provide us our feedback, provide us your feedback to not only what I laid out today, with the recent migration to HIFLD Open, but also to kind of get exposed with some of the other programmatic updates and ongoing operations of things like HIFLD Secure, how data stewards are currently providing data to our ecosystem, what are still some of your outstanding needs as they relate to kind of mission application of geospatial data and where HIFLD might play a role in that. And so to kind of get ready for that feedback forum, we've had an ongoing I guess, feedback request mechanism that we certainly would invite everyone on this call to take advantage of. It really takes less than 10 minutes to do. I think it's got 8 questions, and certainly would help us ahead of time to sort of set the table of that agenda to make sure that we have a relevant and impactful day that day on November 6th. And that is a Monday, kind of an odd day maybe to have a feedback forum, but it's the Monday before the National Fusion Center Association comes into town, which we will also be a part of that week. So we really were trying to take advantage of sort of the dual attendance as those folks came into town from a Homeland Security enterprise perspective. Next slide. Okay. So that kind of wraps it up for my presentation in support of Mike Donnelly to kind of talk a little bit about HIFLD Open on the move and the recent migration to the GEO platform. But I do just want to kind of close with 2 things. One is, of course, there's our contact information if you need to reach us. The general inbox is there on the screen, as well as Mike Donnelly's direct contact information along with the new HIFLD Open site on the GEO platform. So please take advantage of all 3 of those items. And thirdly, I just again want to extend a special thanks to NAPSG, who is a non-voting member of our HIFLD subcommittee, and all of their support in helping us to get the message out to you, the end user community, about our capabilities, our changing capabilities, and hopefully our new capabilities that will be coming online. So to Rebecca and the entire crew at NAPSG, thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Travis, thank you very much for the overview on HIFLD Open and some of the latest updates both to the data as well as the features and capabilities. It's certainly an improved and enhanced capability for the community at large. Next, what I'm going to share with you is a couple of live demonstrations of some different types of decision support tools and applications that were developed and used for preparedness, as well as some recent events that actually use HIFLD data and give you a deeper lens into how you can start to use the data as well for efforts in your communities. So the first demonstration I'm going to share with you is actually a preparedness capability specifically for use in exercise location and planning, but I think it's also going to give you an eye into how you can use these national level data assets to support things like identifying and assessing risk and conducting your threat hazard identification and risk assessment process, as well as in the process of estimating capabilities and then getting into actually planning to deliver those capabilities and then validating the capabilities through exercises. So that'll be the first capability I'll share with you. You can see that this tool specifically is one that is hosted by FEMA, but it uses quite a bit of HIFLD data, and we'll show you how. It's going to be made available through the Preparedness Toolkit, which is an official FEMA capability for preparedness resources available to the whole community, meaning this toolkit is not behind a firewall or behind a login. It's all on the public side, but there are some features and tools that you can access and use in real time behind their firewall. And then provided here is the web link to the actual application that I'll be sharing today. Great. So what you can see here is that Preparedness Toolkit landing page. And essentially specifically the tool that I'll share with you is going to be available through this exercise design and development tool and HCEEP resources shortcuts here. Great, so here you can actually see the landing page for this particular tool. I just want to highlight that this tool was designed specifically for exercise planners. It was not designed for GIS staff, but certainly GIS staff can use it, as well as others that are involved in preparedness efforts in their agencies and jurisdictions. I'm going to provide a very quick overview. I'm not going to share with you everything that the tool does because it's actually quite robust. But basically, it's a map journal tool that allows you to identify hazards near your location or in your community so that you actually know what hazards are present out of a series of 17 hazards that we've aggregated. We'll look at where vulnerable populations are with respect to the exposure to those hazards, and then it starts to get into what infrastructure and resources may be impacted or may be around your area of interest for a given exercise based on your hazard selection. So the first step in using this tool is exploring your hazards. And you can see this is a national aggregated map here of 17 different hazards. And basically what you can do is just enter in an area of interest, or you can zoom into the map and it'll take you right there. And that allows you the opportunity to dig in. And for purposes of today, we'll take a look at Columbia. So you can see it takes you down through on a binary yes, no, which hazards are present in that particular community or area of interest. In this case, animal diseases as well as hurricane. So then what you would want to do is continue on down, and this allows you to dig deeper into that hazard of interest. In this case, we'll take a look at the hurricane hazard. And this is where you really start to see the use of that HIFLD data, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. So the first tab up here takes you through a series of different capabilities. So first it looks at just hazard exposure and that data. Is the hurricane hazard present in this area of the country? And for the purposes of today, we'll zoom back into that area right around Columbia, South Carolina. And then it takes a look at exposure to that hazard in addition to vulnerable populations using the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index. Takes just a moment to load here. You can see, and if you're not familiar with things like this before, it gives you a really good way to kind of step through how to read the map and what it actually means. So you can zoom in and you're able to see much better that delineation between hazard exposure and your social vulnerability. So you can see the darker purple areas, for instance, are your areas where have a combination of higher social vulnerability as well as exposure to this particular hazard, in this case, hurricane. But now this is where you're going to start to see the actual use of HIFLD data. So in this case, we've taken a number of different HIFLD data sets that align to buckets that we've identified as things like community lifelines. So what do we mean by that? Critical facilities that support distributed systems that communities rely on. So things like electrical power generation, oil and natural gas, wastewater, drinking water, communications, et cetera. And as you zoom in, it can take a moment, but you can actually start to see where some of those different critical infrastructure are in relationship to the exposure of the selected hazard, in this case, hurricane. And the symbols are aligned based on what's in the legend over here. And then you can essentially repeat the same thing for different categories of infrastructure. The other one we look at is resources, such as fire departments, hospitals, and other such departments, police departments, local EOCs. So as you can see, that this is actually all HIFLD data coming in and populating this. And while the data may not be exactly accurate, for the purposes of preparedness, when you're running an exercise and whatnot, this is a really great starting point. And you can walk through the other categories within the tool. So that's just to give you an idea there. And then I'd like to move into some other tools and capabilities that we have using the HIFLD data. So the next one is this actual, in this case, it's a model resource management dashboard that was developed initially for use in Hurricane Harvey to support tracking and understanding awareness of search and rescue requests and the status of those search and rescue requests. But then it also provided some pretty valuable information to search and rescue practitioners and leaders to understand once they rescue folks, if they need to be brought to a hospital, well, where do they go? And also open shelters, so they have an idea of which shelters are actually open and active and accepting patients. Now, what I want to mention here is this is a case where we actually brought a data set from HIFLD serving as the base data. And then what we did to make it actionable in this specific incident was we actually had to amend that data set to be able to indicate, in this case, an attribute. In this case, the attribute is status information. Is a hospital open or closed? This is a way you're able to take HIFLD data, using it as a foundation or a base, and modifying it to meet the specific needs and requirements of the event or the response that you're supporting. And this is publicly accessible, so you can see this here since it is a generic web mapping application that we developed as a model. Great, and then the last one that I wanted to show you is the most recent example from Hurricane Maria specifically. I'm going to bring this over in my browser, but again, this is available, publicly accessible, using all publicly available data, the majority of which is available directly through HIFLD. Little bit slow here. I might be having an internet issue. So with that, what I just wanted to highlight, this is one example, but you can see the data here for border crossings in U.S. ports of entry specifically is a data set that's being pulled from HIFLD Open as well. And then if you were to click through some of these other tabs, including health and communications and others, energy, they're also using HIFLD data as base infrastructure data. And this is particularly important in the case of an incident like Hurricane Maria, where they didn't have any other, in some cases, other sources of data. So it's a pretty important one from that standpoint to show you how that HIFLD data can be used to also serve as a foundation in meeting key gaps during critical incident response and recovery. Great, so with that, I'm just going to share with you here a few of the key lists. So one of the things that we did send all participants was a copy of that HIFLD data list. It's a really great resource so you can gain better familiarity of all of the data that's available through HIFLD, both on Open as well as on HIFLD Secure, and that we are able to navigate and understand that. But certainly the HIFLD Open website is very easy to search and discover the data that you need. And as Travis mentioned earlier, there is a HIFLD community feedback form. It's very short, 8 questions, doesn't take more than 10 minutes. And I just really want to encourage you all to take a few minutes and provide feedback to the HIFLD community and the HIFLD subcommittee about the data and about your needs and requirements. This is really useful so that your federal interagency partners can be sure that they are working through priority data quality, data needs that you have. And as a reminder, if you have follow-on questions or inquiries about HIFLD and about the HIFLD data, you can certainly reach out to this email at hifld@hq.dhs.gov. And with that, we've got just a couple minutes. If folks have any questions, we'll be taking those here. And I do have a few questions from folks that I'm gonna step through. Some I've answered in the question and answer tool within WebEx, and others I will take verbally now with Julie and Travis on the line to support. Okay, great. The first question I've got is from Joshua. Is there a way to download several data sets at once, such as batch or bulk downloads, so that they can quickly generate an offline GIS capability from a data perspective? Travis, are you able to take that question?
I can, and maybe at the present time artfully dodge it, but it's a great question. It's one that we've gotten, I think, over the course of the release of HIFLD Open, in which we are beginning to work not only organically within DHS, but also with Esri, which is the Enterprise License Agreement partner to DHS at the time, to see if we can't get on sort of the open data roadmap to see how that could be best serviced. So I actually saw Andrew Turner, who is the program director and CTO over the open data, and we were talking about that. So as I mentioned, kind of an artful dodge here, but it is on our list. It's one that we have seen where folks might want to have an add to cart kind of capability, and then sort of a checkout function where they would receive maybe a large amount of data available for download. So there is sort of an interim step now as far as working there to add to your favorites, but again, it is sort of an incremental one-off download at the current time, but it is on kind of our sort of development requirements backlog.
Great, thank you. Then the next question that we're going to take here is, I believe with respect to HIFLD Secure. When can we expect to talk about the Secure platform, or who should I get in touch with about this? I would like to know how different the data will be in the Secure platform for emergency management. So I can take an initial answer to a part of that. We did focus today's virtual training on HIFLD Open specifically. However, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the HIFLD data list that we sent you by email does include the breakdown of which data sets are available in HIFLD Open versus HIFLD Secure. So you're able to see which data assets you're able to gain access through Open versus Secure.
No, that's great, Rebecca. Thank you for doing my job for me. And I would just add to that, as you seek to gain access to HIFLD Secure, HIFLD Secure does require a HISN, or a Homeland Security Information Network, username and pass. If you're on this call today and you currently do not have a HISN username and pass and would like to be sponsored for one, you can email the HIFLD inbox that was provided. The DHS Geospatial Management Office will review your request and your organization to make sure that you qualify. If you do, you will be nominated dynamically from the Geospatial Management Office, and you'll receive kind of a questionnaire to fill out as part of HISN to gain access to that. And once you have your HISN username and pass, you will then be able to kind of log in, and that provides you a login not only to HIFLD Secure, which is really a web app that has been fundamentally shaped to look very similar to the user experience of HIFLD Open. There are some differences there, which we can do at a later webinar in greater detail, but it also provides you access to the overarching GII, the Geospatial Information Infrastructure. And while there's a lot of additional functionality, for purposes of today's call, that is essentially the DHS's GMO headquarters Esri portal on-premise implementation to support Homeland Security. And so there's both data sets that are available on HIFLD Secure and some expanded functionality that is available to you as part of being able to use that GII portal.
Great, thank you, Travis. And we've got one last question that we're going to take here, which is in regards to the question of, can I contribute my data as a REST service to HIFLD?
So great question, and a question that I'm actually most passionate about right now personally. We have been, and maybe I'll have another good excuse and not a great reason right now, but we've been working aggressively to sort of break over our knee the legacy HIFLD DVDs and instantiate those on these two online platforms, those being HIFLD Open and HIFLD Secure. And I'd say, you know, naturally we had the additional hiccup over the summer of migrating HIFLD Open to the GEO platform. And so we've been kind of turning our crank as fast as we can to get the data as it's been provided, as well as new data as it comes online, instantiated in these new infrastructures. So today there is not sort of a dynamic mechanism to sort of upload your data to our site. We also want to be working with the GMO and all of our data providers to see what's the best way to kind of open up that feedback loop and sort of close the cycle in a more formal way so we can get the best available information, because we certainly recognize that those of you that are operating in states and locals and doing this data collection for your communities every day have the most latest up-to-date data that's most accurate, and we want to find the right organized way for us to be able to ingest that on a regular basis and normalize that at a national scale. So I guess, you know, long story short, we want to work with you, and we're working towards that, but we don't have a mechanism in place today. You can email the inbox, and we can kind of do that in sort of a one-off engagement now to kind of explore what are the possibilities and what are the data sets along the categorical themes that you might have, and then individually work with our data sets who those impact to see about ingesting some of that data as part of their maintenance cycle, so it can be incorporated in our release cycle. So sorry for the long-winded answer. We want to have a better answer for you as the months and years to come, but that's what we're working with now and working towards.
Excellent. Thank you, Travis. There's one other question I'd like to take before we close out today, since it pertains specifically to the use of HIFLD data in incidents. And the question is from Okan. Throughout the incidents like hurricanes, EOCs collect and consume data, and they usually purge data or do not try to specifically store time-stamped data related to a disaster. Is there any effort to collect these so it is possible to reconstruct it? So I can take the first part of answering that. In the experiences that we had with Hurricane Harvey as well as Hurricane Irma, there was some incident data that was generated. We did not take that incident data specifically generated by, say, a state EOC, but the data, incident level data that was provided from national authoritative sources such as FEMA that could be publicly accessible was shared through those respective Hurricane Harvey HIFLD for Harvey or HIFLD for Irma. And as that incident data changed, we simply, meaning as the event progressed and new data became available, even if it's a similar set of data, just an update to it, we simply republished the updated data in some instances. So it did allow for some, albeit limited, timestamping of that incident data. But that was something that we did take a look at and attempt to do for Hurricanes Harvey and Irma. And I don't know, Travis, if there's anything else you'd like to share with regards to that time-stamped incident data.
No, I think you covered it well. We certainly did our best in situ, sort of being called up in response to all the hurricanes to try and label the data as such. And I think that's in particular the damage assessments that were being released almost daily, and as those changed, trying to append the date for when those were released, so they could offer some sort of kind of daily playback if somebody wanted to sort of forensically explore that. That was certainly not true of every data set that entered the ecosystem, but I know where we were working, maybe even in concert with some of the NAVSIG folks at the time, we were trying our best to append those timestamps or those dates to best inform the response and the user community, I guess, after the hurricane.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Travis. Well, that concludes our virtual training for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for staying on and asking questions. If you do have any follow-along burning questions, I will be answering a couple in the question and answer feature here in WebEx for the next couple of minutes. Otherwise, feel free to send your general HIFLD inquiries over to the HIFLD@hq.dhs.gov, and then I'd really encourage everyone to start exploring on the HIFLD Open website. There are so many rich data sets available through that site, and it's very easy to search, discover, and navigate. I already saw some questions about some specific data sets around HUD housing and other types of housing. Go in there and take a look. I think you might be surprised at what you might be able to find that's directly applicable to your work in public safety. And with that, I'd like to thank our instructors today, Mike Donnelly, Acting Director of the DHS Geospatial Management Office, Travis Hardy, the Program Director, as well as Julie Eckert, who's been on as well. Thank you all very much for the opportunity today, and we will be emailing all of the participants the link when the recording and materials are launched to our website. Have a great day and take care.